Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another episode of the Chelsea Fan TV podcast. First things first, guys, make sure you smash the likes, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and make sure you leave your thoughts on today's episode in the comments below, guys. And as always with Chelsea, there's loads to get through. At the time of recording, there's about 5 days left until the Blues jet off to the States for the start of the pre-season tour, and only a week until we have our first game against Wrexham, so things are starting to heat up. Preparations are stepping up. But one thing that doesn't seem to be stepping up at this point in time is incomings. We're still waiting for some more solid incomings. Yes, Nicholas Jackson's come through the door, but the Caicedo deal doesn't really seem to be making an awful lot of progress, but at least not publicly. And it doesn't really seem to be too many links with that many other players. Yes, there's some links to Rayan Cherki from Lyon, etc., but not an awful lot else out there at this point in time. So as the days tick down towards pre-season, I guess you get a little bit more impatient, a little bit more frustrated, but there's so much to get into. Delighted to be joined by Harry for this week's episode. Mate, welcome to the podcast, welcome to the channel. Thanks for coming. What have you made of Chelsea's kind of transfer window so far? Have you been impressed with how things have gone? Are you frustrated by certain things? How have you seen it so far?
I've mixed feelings about it. I'm quite happy with a lot of the ones that are going because I do think Chelsea obviously needed a massive clear out, and a lot of the dead weight has definitely gone. There's still a few more players I think do need to go, but when it comes to incomings, it's not looking great at the moment. And Kunku coming in was obviously done ages ago, and it was just sort of officially making it happen. And I am very happy with Christopher Nkunku. I do think he's a class player, but I feel like midfield is really lacking at the moment, and the only link we've really got in midfield is to Moises Caicedo, who I think is class, probably a bit overpriced with how much we're going to have to pay for him. But then again, after how shambolic last season was, we probably are going to have to pay a bit more for younger players or any players really. But I do think midfield is where we are really lacking. And I think a goalkeeper is needed quite badly. Onana was quite heavily linked with us, but obviously United have come in there and got him, which isn't ideal because I did want Onana mainly in. Pochettino obviously is backing Kepa, which I don't know if it's the right choice, but if he thinks it's the right choice, then just going to have to back the manager on it. Hopefully Kepa, because obviously the price we pay for Kepa was insane all that time ago. So hopefully we can get an insane player out of Kepa, especially this season, because he's very hit and miss. But I think just more incomings, especially with a few more experienced players that are a bit older as well, because we seem to always just be bringing in at the moment loads and loads of young players. Like he's brought in so many, which is good, I think, for development. But when we're doing it, so many young players and not really bringing in a few more older players, it is a bit concerning. We're just relying on so much youth, which has potential, but isn't necessarily going to reach its full potential. So it's a bit concerning.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of two ways of looking at it for sure. I mean, I've always approached the window in sort of two parts, as it were. I always thought that like June was all about getting the outgoings, getting the bulk of the players out of the club that needs to be got out of. And I think fair play to the owners and the directors have come in for a lot of criticism over the last year since they've been here for what's happened last season. But I think credit where credit's due. I think, the amount of players we've got out the door and how quickly we've got them out the door. Yes, we might not have always got the best fees we possibly could have got for certain players, but in terms of the wages off the books, I think getting £65 million for Kai Havertz was a phenomenal deal for Chelsea, considering it's almost what we paid for him, and he's had 3 very poor years for us. I think that's a great deal. I think £60 million for Mason Mount was a good deal as well, to get £125 million for the pair of them. Admittedly, I would have preferred Mason Mount to stay, but obviously it's clear that there was something was going on there, complete breakdown in communication. So to get £125 million for the pair, I think is fantastic business. I think getting rid of the likes of Pulisic, Loftus-Cheek as well out the door. I mean, I would have been happy to keep Ruben, but obviously I think he wanted to move on. Pulisic gone, Loftus-Cheek gone. Just Lukaku, Aubameyang, Ziyech, really the main ones to get rid of next. I mean, Koulibaly and Mendy. Koulibaly's wages, I think, were the biggest thing to get off the books there. Just very quickly on Koulibaly, because like a lot of Chelsea fans, I was dead excited for when he was coming. He was one of those that was linked every year on year with a move to the Premier League, and it never happened. The 1 year he comes is the year that Napoli then go on to win the Italian league, and he comes to Chelsea and it doesn't particularly work out. Are you surprised that it didn't really work out for him here? Because I thought it'd be really good.
I thought that as well. I remember when he was announced, I was like, ideal, we've got a really good replacement for like Rudiger, Christensen, obviously they'd gone. So him coming in, class centre-back at Napoli, and then obviously he leaves. They win the league and we finish 12th. and do horrendously this season. And now he's gone straight away, which is mad to me because I thought Koulibaly was one of those players that probably did stick around for a few seasons and, you know, be a class player. But obviously the complete opposite's really happened because he's only just come in, he's already gone, which is absolutely mad.
But yeah, I mean, I guess to get his 200 grand plus week wages off the books, it was a big plus. Yeah, he's taken a bit of a hit on the fee, but I think it's probably an admittance from the ownership group that that signing was perhaps a mistake, potentially, on their behalf. It's easy to look back and now say it was a mistake, but I think with time, you know, you can look back on things and learn. If you think, right, you know what, if we had our time again, we probably wouldn't have signed in. There's probably a few things that they wouldn't have done, but. I mean, in terms of the players that have gone out the door so far, I mean, are you disappointed in any that have left, or do you actually think, you know what, all these guys needed to go? They either didn't want to be here, or they wanted a new challenge, which I guess is kind of the same thing. I mean, any of the players that have left, have you been disappointed to see them go?
The one that I think a lot of people are the same is obviously Mason Mount. I've always seen Mason Mount kind of like a youngster, obviously come up through Chelsea, been here for, what was it, 18 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought he'd be one of the players that just always sort of here until way later on in his career, maybe leave, sort of like Lampard, leave later on in his career, maybe go somewhere else. But obviously he's gone now, which I'm not over the moon with. It does kind of feel like a betrayal from Mason, obviously going to United for more money. He said that he wasn't part of the Chelsea plans, but I thought I saw some of that. Pochettino did want him, did want to keep him. So it does kind of feel like he sold out the club a little bit and sold out the fans. And I am quite sad to see Mason go. Apart from that, though, I feel like a vast majority of the players we've gotten rid of, I'm quite happy to see go. Mendy's the only other one where I could feel like Mendy maybe should have stayed. But then again, Mendy's had some insanely shaky moments. There's been so many moments like Leeds United. I remember obviously Real Madrid.
Terrible.
Yeah, some horrendous moments. But then it does happen to goalkeepers. But Mendy going is the only other one where I'm like, if we could bring in another goalkeeper to replace Mendy, I think it'd be fine. By the moment, we're not really linked. I've not seen us linked to any goalkeepers. And obviously, Poch has already said he backs Kepa. So it's a bit concerning in the goalkeeper side of things. And I hopefully do think we will bring one maybe later on in the window. I think like we definitely do need to bring one in. But we'll just have to wait and see whether we do or don't.
Yeah, no, I think we'll get into goalkeepers in a bit more detail a little bit later on in the show. But I mean, out of the ones that are left to go, obviously, you know, the bulk of the players have moved on, which is great. We've probably got about 3, maybe 4 more potentially of decent offers come in that we can get rid of. I mean, Aubameyang, Ziyech and Lukaku are the next 3 that absolutely have to go out the door. And then Conor Gallagher, I think, and Trevor Chalobah, they're sort of 50-50s in terms of if a decent offer came in and they were happy to go to it, then I think the club would accept it. But I think the club are also equally happy for the pair of them to stay around as well. But I mean, let's touch on Lukaku briefly. What a mad sort of set of circumstances that's turned out to be. Because I remember like when he first came in, like a lot of Chelsea fans were thinking, wow, this is it. This is the guy this is the missing piece. This is the guy that's going to score us the goals and we're going to win the league. And it actually started out all right, to be fair. You know, the goal at the Emirates, it was all looking pretty good. And then, you know, it soon went to shit pretty quickly. And I'll be honest, this probably is the worst deal, not only in Premier League history, but also in Chelsea's history. I think it's the worst transfer in terms of price and how it's worked out. I mean, just shy of £100 million, essentially for a 1-year loan to Inter Milan. I mean, before we talk about where he's going to end up going and how much we're going to get for him, etc., can you believe this has turned out quite as bad as it has?
No, I feel like the downhill spiral definitely started with that interview he did. The unnecessary interview just didn't really need to happen. And ever since then, it just turned into an absolute shit show and went just more and more downhill to a point now where it's mind-blowing how bad the whole Lukaku saga has been. When he first came in, I remember being so excited, thinking we finally got a world-class striker. He's just had a really good season at Inter Milan. He is Prem-proven. He's done it before in the Premier League. He's coming into a Chelsea team with obviously Tuchel in charge, loads of good players around him at the time with really good squad depth. And it started off well, like you said, and then it just it's really shambolic to look at it at how badly it turned out. Like, it's horrendous, especially the fact we paid like nearly 100 million for someone who went back on loan to the club we brought.
It's 1 year loan, wasn't it? 1 year loan, 100 million quid.
Crazy. Like, it's absolutely horrendous how badly that transfer especially turned out. And I think that I've seen like the rumors about like 29 million, 30 million for him, which would be, I mean, at least we're getting something for him. But even then, that's absolute awful. Like a return.
Are you surprised by his behaviour? I mean, obviously, as fans, we don't actually know. It feels like we know them personally, but we don't know these guys personally at all. Hindsight's a great thing, but I look at it now, and you know, despite what you were saying, he's got unfinished business when he re-signed and all that sort of thing. I think it was quite clear that he never actually wanted to be here in the first place. I think he just left because Inter couldn't say no to that money because of their financial situation. And I think as soon as it got a little bit tough, then he wasn't really up for it. But are you surprised by his behaviour? I mean, I don't think it's a surprise for me that, you know, he doesn't want it. He was due back either, you know, this week, Tuesday, Wednesday. And he said that he's not coming back, basically. So Chelsea have extended his return date until Monday, where we fly off to the States. And I think, to be honest, from a Chelsea perspective, I think that's quite smart in terms of you avoid the headlines of Lukaku's gone AWOL and all this sort of thing. You avoid all that unnecessary media stuff, and it gives you a little bit of extra time to sort out his move away to Inter Milan or wherever else it may be. And he doesn't have to come back to the training ground, because you know full well if Lukaku's returning to Cobham, it's like increased media, you know, coverage on the club, on the training. Everyone's going to want to see Lukaku in training. What's he doing? Who's he interacting with? And all that sort of thing. Do you think the club have handled the Lukaku thing quite well?
I think in terms, they've made the best of a bad situation. I think the way they're handling it now, and I think it's the same with obviously Aubameyang and Ziyech have also been told to return. Is it day 17, something like that, to return later on? Yeah, with Lukaku, his behaviour is insanely, I feel like, very muggy for his Chelsea fans and for the club itself. Like the way he's acted, that interview as well, just to bring that back up again. Crazy to me, because he's just signed for a record fee at the time, pretty sure it was, coming into the club. Obviously, an ex-Chelsea player, was here when he was a lot younger, unfinished business, to coming to prove himself in a Chelsea squad. And he just he took the piss, really. And now he's just mugging the club off as much as he can. He just is really annoying at the fact he came back in the first place, because he just clearly didn't want to be here. And, you know, you don't really want players that don't want to be there, especially for the amount we paid for him. But yeah, the way they're handling it at the moment, I think, is the best thing they can do. The sooner he's gone, the better. I think the second he goes, it's brilliant. Like, probably people will be a lot happier when Lukaku is gone. So I think it's just really working on getting him gone is definitely the next thing that needs to happen in the outgoings of the club.
I mean, if we can get, as I say, reportedly around 30, maybe 35 million pounds all in, including the bonuses and all that sort of stuff, yes, it's a massive loss, but I think just that his wages off the books, well over 300 grand a week, he's the highest paid player at the club. Just that in itself is a massive plus to get off the wage bill. I think obviously he's still got 3 years left on a contract as well, which is kind of mad. But yeah, look, a complete disaster, and the sooner he's gone, the better. So let's just hope that Inter Milan, once that Onana money comes in for them, that they've got a little bit of extra cash to chuck at this Lukaku deal, and we can get it done, because it's in everybody's best interest to get this deal done, and we kind of just move on. Aubameyang's another one that is, again, it hasn't really caused any problems at the club, but that was another strange decision to sign him in the first place, because, you know, you sign him. Only reason you sign him is because Thomas Tuchel wants him. But then those guys, they signed him knowing they were going to sack Tuchel anyway. They spent one game together, and then you're just lumbered with an Aubameyang who, at that stage of his career, isn't really offering much. You know, unless you're a team that creates loads of chances and he just stays in the box, then great. But if you're looking for anything else from him, it's a disaster. Hopefully he can move on soon as well. But just on Hakim Ziyech quickly, feels like we can't get rid of this guy. Like, it's going to go on loan to PSG. Then obviously, because we're all hands on deck on the Enzo thing, obviously maybe sent the fucking interns to do the paperwork for the PSG stuff. It didn't get through in time. That move falls through, and then the Al Nassr move gets sorted. And then it's kind of the same things that were flagged up in his PSG medical, like a few concerns about the knee and the hip. They were still happy to sign him, but they wanted him to take a 40% reduction in his wages, which he hasn't accepted. Maybe there's still a chance that Al Ali might try and come in for him, possibly as well. But I mean, do you feel like this guy is just someone like we're just destined to never be able to get rid of? And I don't really know where he goes.
Yeah, it does feel like that with Ziyech. I thought that the Al Nassr seemed so solid, like it seemed like it was done, and then all of a sudden you see his medical knee injury. That whole scenario is going on, and it's like, oh, he's back again, and now he's still currently at the club with pre-season right around the corner. Ziyech has always been a weird one where I've always thought Ziyech would do a lot better than he actually has done. And there is a good player in Ziyech, but I don't think you're going to get the best out of the player in this Chelsea squad. So I do think he has to go. But getting rid of him seems to be impossible at the moment. Obviously, like I said, PSG, Al Nassr. Hopefully, another Saudi club does come in and does buy him, because I mean there is still a player there, but he's just he's very injury prone, it seems, and has been ever since he really joined Chelsea. But yeah, hopefully we can get him gone, because I do think Ziyech needs to go. I don't think he's a player that should really be in the squad. But if he does stay, I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world. I just don't think it'd really be beneficial for him or the club, because I feel there are better alternatives to Ziyech. But we'll have to wait and see what happens, really, because I do hope he goes.
Yeah, I think we're massively relying on the Saudis to help us out with this one. I mean, they've helped us out with a few, but for sure we are relying on them again for Ziyech, because it's kind of mad. But Ziyech is still, like, as shown at the World Cup, like, if he's in the right team, if he's more of a main man sort of thing, more of a big fish in a small pond kind of situation, then he can be very useful, and there still is a decent player there. I'm almost a little bit surprised to an extent that there seems to be no European interest in him whatsoever. Now, there could be, but they might not be interested because of the wages. He might have to take a bit of a wage cut potentially to go somewhere in Europe. But, you know, from all the reports you see and stuff, there's literal no interest at all in a player who a few years ago was highly sought after, you know, following that Ajax run to the Champions League semi-finals and stuff. And now, other than Saudi Arabia, doesn't really seem to be any interest in him whatsoever, which I do find quite strange. But let's move on to incomings quickly before we start talking about Pochettino pre-season and all that sort of thing. Nicholas Jackson is obviously the only... Well, obviously, we bought some youngsters through the door, but in terms of straight into the first team, Nicholas Jackson is the only real one that has arrived into the club. Obviously, first day at training yesterday, Tuesday. We're recording Wednesday morning. What did you think of that signing? And are you excited for how he could do? Because again, I think it's a player that not a lot of Chelsea fans know an awful lot about. Was very close to joining Bournemouth in January, but failed a medical there with a hamstring issue, and that move subsequently fell through. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's a good move? Are you excited to see how he does? Do you think he could do well for us?
With strikers, it's one of the things where we just seem to be cursed when it comes to strikers. And with Jackson, I'm optimistic about him coming in, and I hope he does well. I do think I've seen his second half of the season at Villarreal last season was obviously really good. He looked class, scored a few goals. With him coming in, it's a weird one as well, because I don't actually know, does he start in that Chelsea team? It is quite awkward.
It depends who else comes in, doesn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, it does, yeah. I don't know that he's going to be a rotation player or a starter. I'm excited to see what he does and how he performs. It's just I don't know if Pochettino is going to start well, because I feel like you'd favour Nkunku over Jackson as like a more attacking central player. But obviously, I think Jackson can go a lot further forward, whereas Nkunku can drop a bit deeper. But I don't know what's going to happen with him. I mean, I hope he does well. I hope he's absolutely class.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as one of those signings where, look, if it works out, fantastic. You've got a good player. You've got a player. You picked up a decent player for cheap for the first team, which is quite hard to do in the market these days. And if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, then you've signed someone that's young enough where even in sort of maybe 2 or 3 years' time, if it hasn't necessarily worked out how we all expected it to, then there is still some resale value there. And you'd like to think you'd at least get your money back, or you might make a bit of a profit on him as well. So I almost look at it as a bit of a win-win situation on that front. But the striker thing's really interesting, isn't it? Because we presume that Pochettino, he favours a 4-2-3-1 generally. So you think Nkunku's definitely going to play in that number 10 role. But then in terms of a centre forward, at the moment, out-and-out centre forwards, we just have Jackson and Broja on the books at this point in time. Yes, Nkunku can fill in there and do a job at centre forward if necessary, but he's not been brought in to necessarily play that position. You are sort of leaving yourself, I don't want to say leaving yourself light, but you are taking a big gamble, considering we were 30 to 40 goals short in the league last season, to try and find those goals through two talented players, but still rough around the edges, need a bit of coaching. Their game needs developing a lot in Broja and Jackson. Do you think that's a massive gamble to head into the season with those two and Nkunku as another option there? Because I also look at the striker market. I just think there's not that many decent options out there that could make the difference that we're looking that we need to be made in the team. I mean, just what are your thoughts on, firstly, going with Nkunku, Jackson, and Broja potentially. Well, at least till January, maybe. Do you think that's a big risk?
I do think it's a bit risky, especially with obviously injuries are massive in football. And Broja is ACL, had that huge injury. Was it December injury?
Yeah.
And was out he's been out really till now. He's back in training now, obviously, back at Cobham. But it is so risky, especially with Jackson having injuries on his resume already at such a young age. And obviously Nkunku also had a huge injury at Leipzig. So it is really risky, I think, with these three. And I do feel like we need a striker who's not necessarily a lot older, but a bit more experienced. To get Harry Kane would be phenomenal, but there's no way we're going to get Harry Kane. I've seen Dybala has been thrown around a lot on the table. And I do think Dybala might work there, would be ideal, maybe whacking him into the squad as well. But we definitely do need, I feel like, someone who's not like old, but a bit more experienced, a bit more solidified in that role, whether they play as a backup or whether they start. I do think someone else needs to come in, especially in that attack. With Chelsea, it's always been the curse of strikers. So many flops have come in as a striker and just not performed to their level. Hopefully, this is the game changer now. Hopefully, that turns around completely. But knowing our luck, you can't really put any money on it. Like, no, not a clue which way it's going to go.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because you look back over the last, say, 20 odd years at Chelsea, and we've spent so much money on forwards, and the only big successes have been Drogba and Diego Costa. Yes, Hernan Crespo was okay to an extent, but it wasn't really a main man. He was a good kind of rotational option. Yes, Anelka's done okay, but in terms of out and out, week in, week out performers stepping up for the club when you need them, goals, firing us to trophies, it's only been Drogba and Costa, and we have signed a lot of centre forwards over the years and spent an absolute fortune. And you look at, I think we're in admittance that we do need a centre forward, and Chelsea fans will quite openly acknowledge that we do need another centre forward. But you look at the market out there this summer. Yes, we'd all love Harry Kane, but it's never going to happen, so we can forget about that. Victor Osimhen's the big name on the market, but we simply cannot afford him. In terms of if Napoli are looking for upwards of 150 million euros for the player, that's just a no-go before it's even started. And when you're shopping with those top players as well, with other big clubs in Europe interested, no Champions League football acts as a bit of a detriment against you. So I think Osimhen's off the table as well. And then you kind of hear about the sort of the three-man shortlist at this point in time. You've got Dusan Vlahovic at Juventus, who's 24. You've got Lautaro Martinez at Inter Milan. You've got Kolo Muani at Eintracht Frankfurt as well. I mean, out of those three names, do any of those excite you? And who do you think would fit the club best from those three? Because I'm not saying they're three bad players, but it's not three players that you look at and you think, wow, they're going to come in and get us 20 goals a season that we need.
I think Vlahovic and Kolo Muani, they interest me more, I think, than Martinez. I don't know whether because it's the whole striker coming to Chelsea thing, but those two definitely interest me more, especially Kolo Muani. I think he's favoured, I saw recently, to potentially go to PSG. But if we did get Kolo Muani, I would be happy with that signing. He's just had a brilliant season at Frankfurt, and he's a promising player. I think Vlahovic as well is. I think he'd be quite suited in the Chelsea team. Vlahovic, having him up top, I think he would be an ideal player to get. But it's also going to come down to the price tag. I think how much Juventus want for him, and whether he wants to come to the club or not as well. Because as you said, with no European football, it's a massive turn off for many players to come here, because obviously players want to compete in the Champions League, even the Europa League, and we're not even offering that because of how bad the season's just been. But I think there is a promising project at Chelsea. I do think if we get a player like that and bring them in, it would really help us this season. So I would be happy with Vlahovic or Kolo Muani, but I don't know what's going to happen. I do think it's going to be later on. A lot of the incomings will obviously start to come in once we've gotten rid of the final few players we do need to get rid of. So hopefully it's a really interesting second half of the pre-season where we bring in loads of players, and potentially some of those players, even if we do just get Vlahovic or Kolo Muani, it'd be amazing. So just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I like you. Those two excite me more than Lautaro Martinez. But ultimately, if Pochettino decides that he wants Martinez and he can make it work for how he wants this Chelsea team to play, then ultimately, I would be on board with that. But yeah, certainly, I do like Dusan Vlahovic. I think he's struggled a bit at Juventus. If you can re-find the Vlahovic that was at Fiorentina, then as a top player there, at 24 years of age, he fits the age range that Chelsea are looking to sign in. I think there's a lot of his attributes would suit the Premier League. I also really like Kolo Muani, more of a versatile forward in terms of not necessarily someone that's an out-and-out nine, can obviously play kind of across the front line as well. But it's interesting because Chelsea have in a situation where they've got to decide what way they want to go. Do you want to bring someone in that you're going to be relying on for the bulk of your goals, or do you try and develop what you've got at this point in time? And rather than having a 20, 25 goals a season striker, try and get maybe 10 to 12 goals from your whole attacking lines. Let's see if Nkunku can get up 10 to 12 goals. Let's see if Mudryk can do that. Can Sterling Madueke do that? Can Jackson and Broder can these guys all get anywhere? Can these guys get around 10 league goals a season each? And then you've kind of found an extra 40, 50 goals that way. I mean, what way do you think's better to go? I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong. It is obviously a lot harder to find someone that's going to score you 20, 25 goals a season. But do you think Chelsea can get more goals out of the existing attackers? Can we get Mudryk to 10 goals? Can we get Sterling 10 goals? You know, because I look at that and I think maybe that's a little bit easier to get the existing guys contributing more goals-wise than bringing someone in for big money and trying to get them 20 goals a season.
It is very you could potentially see them getting all 10 goals, 10 assists a season, something like that. And it would be an ideal scenario to get them all doing that and a striker scoring 20 plus goals, just goals galore. But with the team we've got and the players we've got, after seeing obviously Mudryk and Madueke play a little bit, it is with a manager behind them like Pochettino, and obviously all the new signings are bringing in new midfield. It could happen, and it might be easier to do, especially it means we don't have to rely on one player. With injuries being a part of football, that one player gets injured, then we're really screwed. So having multiple options and having an attack that each contributes in its own way would be ideal, and I think might be the better scenario. But I feel like with most teams nowadays, you do have one standout man who always just scores goals after goals. Obviously, Haaland for City. Kane. Yeah, there's always that one player, and it would be nice to have at Chelsea, but whether we're going to get that, I don't know. Like we said, it's only Drogba and Costa really that have been that kind of player for Chelsea. So I have to wait. It would be ideal to have, but I don't know if we're going to get it. I don't know.
I mean, there's another thought that I've had, and I've mentioned it a few times on the channel before. Part of me thinks, do you think there's a possibility that maybe if Chelsea go with, because we're only playing once a week until January, right? Plus League Cup. So once a week, and then a few weeks we'll be playing twice a week when the League Cup starts. But obviously FA Cup don't start till next year. So part of me is thinking, right, till January, we could get by with Nkunku, Jackson and Broja. And then do we try and sign Ivan Toney in January when he's back available to play football again? As maybe a potential option. Now, again, I think there's risks associated to all these things. There's a risk associated with doing that option. There's also a risk associated with spending quite big money on a Kolo Muani or a Vlahovic or whatever as well. But do you think there could be a situation we envisage where we go with that and we try and sign Ivan Toney in January and get by with what we've got till January? Because I think if there was no ban for Toney, Chelsea would be all over that right now, and he could potentially be a Chelsea player already at this point in time, or close to being, because I think for myself and a lot of Chelsea fans, he would have been the number one choice this summer to bring in as a centre forward. I'm not saying he's like Drogba or Costa, but he's like that in terms of his traits, his physicality, his profile and stuff. And I think he would be perfect for this team.
Yeah, Ivan Toney. I do like Ivan Toney. I do rate Ivan Toney. The whole situation going on around him obviously is not ideal, and a lot of clubs would want to sort of steer clear of that for now, especially while he's banned. But when he's not banned, and potentially bringing him in the winter transfer window could be a plan there, because obviously he's Prem proven. He did brilliant in that Brentford team this season. If you bring him into a team like Chelsea, where there are obviously a lot better players around him, could work out amazingly. And I would love to see Ivan Toney in a Chelsea shirt. So I definitely could get behind that idea, and I would support that idea if it is something Poch wanted to do. But yeah, it's one of those things where the whole ban going on around him, obviously what he was doing weren't exactly ideal, but it's annoying to see a player like that get banned just in general, because such a class footballer, for as good as he did for Brentford. So have him in Chelsea would be absolutely phenomenal. Just have to wait, I guess, but I would back that, I think, if we did bring him in January. I think it would be good.
It's certainly a plausible option for sure. I mean, I think it's becoming a bit more realistic as the days go by. But I agree with what you said, like, obviously, I didn't expect any move on a striker until we return from pre-season. I wouldn't expect a move for a striker to materialise until at least towards the end of July, possibly start of August. Because he's going to want to assess the options in pre-season. Does he think Broja, Jackson, and Kunku can be enough till January potentially, or do we need more? So I think this is one that could definitely develop a little bit later on in the window, centre forwards wise. But let's talk about midfield, because it's clear that midfield is where the majority of the outgoings have been so far. Kovacic, Loftus-Cheek, Mason Mount, etc. At this point in time on the books, we've got Enzo Fernandez, Conor Gallagher, Chukwuemeka, Cassidy, and Andre Santos. Not exactly the best midfield in the world at this point in time. Obviously, there's still plenty of time left in the window. Moises Caicedo is a primary target. This saga is becoming quite tedious. There doesn't really seem to be any updates. Chelsea want the player. Personal terms are agreed and whatnot. We seem to have been locked in talks with Brighton for days on end and not seemingly, or at least publicly, making any progress. It is a bit frustrating. Brighton sort of wanting to hold out for £100 million. And I don't blame them, because it's almost a sort of an issue we've created for ourselves by bringing Enzo Fernandez in for that fee, then seeing Declan Rice going for that fee. You've got another top midfielder in Moises Caicedo. From a Brighton perspective, as much as it's frustrating for us, why wouldn't they ask for £100 million when you see Enzo Fernandez going for that money and you see Declan Rice going for that money? So, I mean, what are your thoughts on Brighton asking for it, or trying to get £100 million first of all? Do you think they're within their rights to do that?
I think it's fair enough then. With the market at the moment is so inflated. Like, the market is beyond broken. And obviously Declan Rice going to Arsenal for 100+ mil. Enzo coming into Chelsea, 100+ mil. Mudryk was loads. So someone like Caicedo, who is young and has just had a class season at Brighton, can show he can do it in the Premier League. I feel like them asking for that much is obviously reasonable. I feel like it's fair play to them. I feel like a lot of clubs would do that in their scenario. With us trying to get him, it's annoying. We don't obviously have to worry about. It's good that we don't have to worry about the player side of things, because he already agreed to come to Chelsea, agreed 2 months ago. But it is annoying having to deal with Brighton and such an inflated market, because they're trying to get as much as they can for him, which again, fair enough. But it's annoying how it's not going forward. And hopefully we can get it done, because I do want Caicedo in the midfield. I think Caicedo would be ideal to get in that midfield, but just bringing in Caicedo, I don't think would necessarily be enough. I feel like we do need maybe another midfielder after that, considering the clear out we just had. Obviously Kovacic, when Mount, when Gallagher could potentially be going, which I probably would be in favour with. So the midfield's quite cleared out at the moment. We do obviously need to bring in players back. Kante going was a massive, massive loss. I think Kante, very upset about that. Kante would be the other player. Forgot to mention that. It would be the other player that I'd be upset about him going out, because Kante was just class. I do think Kante could still perform to a top level in the Premier League. So definitely bringing in replacements to the midfield has to happen. And Moises Caicedo, I think, is one of those replacements we should get.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we have to get him through the door. I always maintain that at the start of this window, for this midfield revamp to be serious, we had to get one of Caicedo or Declan Rice. Declan Rice is not happening, so it has to be Moises Caicedo. And I think I always hear, it's funny with Chelsea fans, they're like, oh, we have to get Caicedo. And then when Brighton asks for 100 million, they're all saying, a lot of them say, oh, we should walk away. There's certain players, unfortunately, where sometimes you've got to break the bank and pay more than you'd be prepared to pay. And there's only certain players you do it for. But for how important Caicedo is going to be for this team, and the need that we have for a top-level midfield player to go into the team and transform the midfield straight away, sometimes you're going to have to pay more than you want. And if it means us paying £100 million for him, obviously it's not ideal for us. They would have wanted to have spent less. I think you just have to do it. I just think you have to. There's certain players where you've got to break the bank and just pay what it takes to get them in the door. And I think he'd be one of them. I mean, and also, a lot of transfers nowadays as well is not necessarily to do with the overall fee. It's more to do with the structure of the payment. How much of that money are they getting up front, and how quickly? Now, for me, if Chelsea paying 100 million gets some more preferential payment terms, if it's better on the books for us, in a strange way, paying £100 million could work out better from a financial and FFP perspective on the books than paying 85 million pounds, because more of that money would have been needed to be paid up front. So I understand it from both situations, but it's really important for me that Caicedo's on the plane to the US on Monday to start preseason. You know, I'm not saying that every signing's got to be done by preseason; they don't, but your main ones do. And Caicedo's obviously our number one target. He needs to be on the plane. I mean, mate, how important for you is it that we avoid the awkward situation, because we're playing Brighton in preseason in the States? How important is it that we avoid a situation where the deal's not done and we go to play Chelsea Brighton in pre-season and Caicedo's lining up for them? He puts in an unreal performance and Brighton are thinking, well, maybe we could squeeze a few more quid out of him here.
Yeah, that'd be a worse scenario. It needs to get done, preferably as soon as possible. And it was something, I think he said 2 months ago, he had agreed personal terms with Chelsea. It does feel like Brighton are taking the piss a little bit with how long they're taking on this transfer. I do understand them trying to get the most money they can out of Caicedo. And obviously their team is being ransacked. Right? They're losing players a lot because of how good of the season they've just had. McAllister going from their midfield as well. Absolutely massive, but they are bringing in other players, and Brighton have such good development. I feel like even if they lose Caicedo to us, they're going to probably replace him, and they've probably got midfielders already ready that they can build up because Brighton's development is that good. Caicedo needs to come in definitely, I think, before pre-season. You want to get, with a main player like that, especially in midfield, one of the most important places where we need a solid midfielder. You want to get him working with Pochettino and Enzo as soon as possible. Definitely in the pre-season, I think he needs to come in as quick as he can. Just hopefully, Chelsea have always been good, I think, when it comes to transfers and negotiations. Recently, we've been paying a lot more for players, but it's the same everywhere, I think, because the market's just so broken. So I do think it's a deal we will get done. And I mean, hopefully we get it done, like I said, before the plane flies over, before the preseason in America starts. I'm just hoping Fabrizio posts any minute now, just done deal, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, it would be ideal. I suppose the only thing from a logistical sense point of view is that, you know, we're not playing Brighton for a few games into pre-season. Like, in a worst case scenario, like, even if a deal can be agreed, because they're both going to be in the States, you know, they obviously can do a medical out there and all that sort of thing. So it wouldn't be a complete disaster. But yeah, you ideally want it to be wrapped up. And I've always maintained, you know, that, you know, there's no need to be panicking or being frustrated about this transfer window. But if we get to pre-season and no one else has been signed yet, then you can start asking questions rightfully and saying, do you know what, maybe we are starting to fall behind a little bit in terms of, you look at other teams and each team's different, but you look at Liverpool, 2 big signings already through the door before pre-season starts. Same with Arsenal. United have obviously got Mason Mount in, could have Andre Onana in before pre-season starts as well for them. You know, you do start falling behind. The more time players have got to bed in their new team, the better they're going to be at the start of the season. For them. So yeah, this one is crucial. Let's wait and see what happens. But it feels like it's just kind of been the same recycled news on Caicedo for the last week. And I always wonder what they could be possibly talking about for days on end. Like, it can't take days and days and days to come to a resolution. Like, there's only so many like options there are, and there's only so much time you can spend talking about. But let's hope maybe this week is the week we get some news on Caicedo. But in terms of the rest of the midfield, obviously, we know that we probably do need another one, but again, I'm kind of in two minds, because we've got to start trusting what we're doing here in terms of, we're obviously buying young, talented players. We've got to start believing in what we're doing, and sooner or later, these guys are going to have to go in. So I look at the likes of your Chukwuemeka's, your Andre Santos, and your Casadets, and I'm not saying we don't need another midfield player, but if you're looking at someone like Romeo Lavia, 40, 50 million pounds, who's 6 months older than Andre Santos and has got 1 Premier League season under his belt, do you not think that, I personally think that surely maybe it'd be better to have Santos as a backup for Caicedo, rather than going to spend another 50 million quid on a player like a Lavia, for example? As good as I think Lavia is, like, Andre Santos, is he considerably worse than Lavia? I would probably say no. I mean, what do you think? Do you think we should be giving these younger midfielders more minutes rather than going to spend money on another one? Because Lavia really seems to be the only kind of other option out there at this point in time that we're strongly linked with.
Yeah, I think doing that, actually getting Santos playing more minutes. Chukwuemeka, who played a little bit last season, not that much, but I thought when he did play, he looked class. Yeah, he looked good. So I think he should be getting more minutes. He should get more playtime. The one midfielder that we did have on loan that we were seeing play a bit and then just disappeared completely, and now obviously he's gone back to Juventus. Dennis Zakaria. I quite liked him as well. I thought he's pretty good.
He was okay. He was okay.
Yeah. And then we just got rid of him completely and started barely using him. And then obviously it was only a loan deal. But it seemed like a really weird loan, just him there, and then he was gone. With the younger players like Santos, and there's a few others. There's quite a lot of young players now in Chelsea. They do, I feel like, need to actually, play a bit more. Pre-season, I think it's going to be really big. If some of them shied in pre-season, I think it might determine whether we bring in someone like Lavia. Or whether we rely on them or actually use them as backups and use them what they're there to do, which is to play football. Some of them I feel like will go on loan. Obviously, Fofana, who's attacker, has already gone on loan. So I do feel like some of the younger Chelsea players are probably going to go out on loan. I hope that's good for them. Hopefully, it's the right decision. But actually keeping some of them, playing them as rotation, or maybe even starting in some games, it would be a smarter choice and probably a cheaper choice as well. Definitely better on the book. So it's a weird one with Lavia as well, because the price tag on him for his age is quite a lot, but it's not surprising just because of how inflated the market is right now.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, look, obviously they're all three will be assessed in pre-season, the young midfielders, and then they'll decide what to do with them. But I actually do think, as we've been saying, I think it makes more sense to give more minutes to a Chukwuemeka, to a Santos, than it is to say bring in a Lavia for that money. That's just my point of view. And I know there'll be people that disagree with that and think, oh, we've got to go and get another midfielder in. But look at the midfield market, and for the sort of the age range we're shopping in and what kind of profile we're looking for, there's not an awful lot out there. There really isn't. That's going to kind of make a difference that we need. So I think, you trust what you've got, you develop what you've got. And then we're only playing once a week anyway. Like, it's not like there's going to be a huge amount of rotation in the middle of the park. Yes, I understand the point of view that if Enzo Fernandez gets injured or if Caicedo gets injured, you're looking at something like, well, fuck, who comes in there? Yeah. But then I guess it comes back to that point. You've got to trust what you're doing and believe in these players. Now, I understand it's easier at other clubs where there's perhaps less pressure, but at the same time, we've got to start believing in what we're doing. And if we're going down this route, we've got to start backing ourselves. And these guys are going to have to start playing sooner or later. We can't just keep sending them out loan after loan after loan. Yeah. So, it's going to be an interesting one to see what happens. But yeah, Caicedo absolutely has to get done. And then from there, I don't expect another move for a midfielder until pre-season's done, because once we've assessed the options, he might decide, I'm happy to go with two of the three youngsters. One can go on loan, or he might think, do you know what, I need another player. But I mean, just on Pochettino, mate, we've seen him do a couple of media things now, in-house media on his first day at Cobham. Then he did the press conference, I think, last week as well. We've had a week and a half or so of pre-season. He's working the lads hard, which is great. What have you made of his start to life? I guess the interviews, the way that he's spoken, has he got you excited? Because he certainly got me excited, and looking forward to the season ahead. I know it's only words, and that's not really. And the big thing is getting the performances on the pitch. But I thought he addressed everything really well. His answers were great. He spoke like a Chelsea manager should speak. He understands the size of the task at hand. How impressed have you been by him with what we've seen?
I'm really happy with his mentality, because he wants to challenge like City and push to win like the league, which is obviously ideal and probably a bit too aspirational for how we currently are at the moment. Obviously, just finishing 12th, but I'm really happy with his approach of taking over. And obviously, Pochettino got Spurs to a Champions League final. That in itself, I know they didn't win the final, but even getting them there is insane. With the Chelsea team he's got, the money we're willing to invest, and some of the players he already has in that team, I am happy with Pochettino's doing. I actually just can't wait to get the season started. I think a lot of rival fans are really, really underestimating what Pochettino might do at this Chelsea club and what hopefully he does do, because I personally think top 4 with Pochettino definitely possible and more or less guaranteed, I think, because he is a good manager, and I'm really, really, really happy with everything he's done so far, and the mentality. Like I said, I'm really happy with his mentality.
What do you think the expectations are this season? Because obviously, like, we know that last season was a complete disaster. I think for me, the biggest thing is, look, we all want to be playing European football. Of course, we do. It's going to be shit on midweeks, having to watch other teams playing in the Champions League and whatnot. But ultimately, I know people might say, "Oh, you're only saying that because you're not in the competition or whatnot." But I think there is a definite feeling that actually this could be really beneficial for us, particularly with Pochettino, someone that like needs a lot of, enjoys the time on the training pitch, time to get new ideas, get players gelling together. The fact that we're going to have a lot of time between games to work on stuff on the training pitch is going to be a big plus for us. But I always look at this season and I think the aim has got to be to get back into the Champions League minimum. So top five now with the new model. So fifth place should get the Champions League. Again, it depends on how teams perform in Europe this season in England. But providing they do okay, I think fifth place will be enough this season to get Champions League football. And then I think there's no excuse for us not to be trying to win a domestic cup, or a League Cup or an FA Cup. We've lost our last 5 finals at Wembley. It's been way too long since we last won a domestic piece of silverware. All the way back to Antonio Conte with the 1-0 FA Cup Eden Hazard penalty against United back in 2017. So last 5 Wembley Cup finals we've lost. So look, for me, Champions League and we need to try and add a domestic cup. It's got to be the expectation for the season. I mean, your expectations the same? Is that what you would like to see Chelsea try and do?
Yeah, I think is a realistic expectation. With top 4, I think even trying to predict the top 6 this season is insane. It is probably the most competitive in terms of the Premier League for a while, because every team you look at is good players and a good manager, more or less, in that top half. It is brilliant how competitive the season hopefully should be. And I do feel like getting top 4 is going to be massive for Pochettino. I do think his main priority, of course, has to be the league, has to be a high placement in the league. But winning a domestic cup like the Carabao Cup or the League Cup or the FA Cup would be ideal. And I think it should be something he aims for as well. I feel like obviously he doesn't have to worry about Champions League football, mid-season football. His priority should be the league. And then very second high priority, he should prioritize either the FA Cup or Carabao Cup. Obviously, the FA Cup doesn't start till way later on. So if he does want to prioritize the Carabao, I think, yes, we've got to go for it. The finals against Liverpool, still not, I don't think anyone's recovered from. Losing on penalties is the worst way. The way we did it was horrendous. So if he gets to Wembley, hopefully he breaks the curse, because it does feel like a curse. And winning an FA Cup and Carabao Cup would be perfect, I think. And I think that would be a good season for us.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Chelsea fans are thinking we're just going to go straight back into those top 4, top 5 spaces. Champions League football, I don't think it's as guaranteed as that. I'm not saying we're not going to, but I don't think it's as guaranteed as people think. As you just touched on, the Premier League's so competitive now. Like, Arsenal are bang up there again. Fantastic window. Timber, Rice, all right, Kai Havertz, we're happy to see the back of him. Could go and do well at Arsenal, but they're serious. They're showing intentions. Liverpool will be back up there again. Man United will go again as well. Then you've got teams like Newcastle who are there to stay about. Aston Villa are doing great business in the market, and a great manager in Unai Emery. And you've got Brighton there as well. There's about 7 teams going for those 5 spaces. Tottenham perhaps won't be as shit again next season either. As much as we banter them, like, they've got no European football either. If they keep Harry Kane, they've added James Maddison, etc. If they sort themselves out at the back a little bit, they could be there or thereabouts. So there's 8 teams going for kind of 5 spaces, and it's going to be very, very competitive. So there's no guarantee that we do go back into those Champions League places, and it's going to be easy for us. I think there will be struggles this season. We will find it difficult. We will lose a fair few games. But we do it's hard to tell what we're going to do, because it's such an unknown. It's weird.
It's very unpredictable.
The squad that started last season is totally different to the squad that finished the season, and now the squad that's going to start this season is going to be totally different again to the squad that finished the season. So, like, you almost feel like you're kind of starting again, and you feel you don't actually know what to expect from this Chelsea team, because you look at it and you look at the squad and you think, do you know what? There's some really, really good players there, some talented players. Like, I think hardly any managers wouldn't want to work with that group of players. Yet it's still a massive unknown. I mean, do you have a bit of a sense of kind of the feeling of the unknown? You don't really know what to expect from Chelsea this season.
No, yeah, you really don't. I think like no matter what happens in the Premier League season, teams are going to underperform because the amount of good teams there are, everyone's goals are high. So no matter what, there's always going to be underachievers. And with this, it is literally so unpredictable. Oh, we could go win the league. We could finish 7th. It's so hard to predict what's going to happen with this Chelsea team. But I'm quite optimistic, and I feel like it is going to be. I just got a feeling about Pochettino. Pochettino is one of those managers where I feel like it's harder for me to see him not finish at least in the top 5 than finish like, I don't know, 8th or something. No matter what Pochettino does, it's probably harder for him to do worse this season.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, because the season was so bad. So no matter what he does, it's going to be an improvement. And the players we've got, some of them are class, some of them world class. And him as a manager, brilliant. So I'm optimistic, and I do hope, obviously, I think most Chelsea fans hope we push for that top 4, top 5 finish and win a domestic cup. But it's so unpredictable because Newcastle, brilliant signings. Their midfield is looking amazing. Arsenal, like I said, some brilliant signings. United are probably going to make a few more signings. I know they're quite heavy talks with Rasmus Højlund. He's always been thrown around there. So it's going to be a really interesting season, really exciting season. I just can't wait to actually watch Chelsea play again.
Yeah, it's certainly very interesting. I mean, the start of the season is going to be so important, and you look at Chelsea's first 5 games, and there's no easy games in the Premier League at all, as we all know. But as far as starts to the season go, it's not bad for Pochettino.
Yeah.
We've got Liverpool at home first game of the season. That's going to be a tough game, but I always think, getting big teams out the way fairly early on is actually beneficial because there's no form to go off, and you've got no idea kind of how they're going to play as a team. And there's also nothing really riding on the game as such. Like, it's not like we're playing them later on in the season and we're going for the title or we're going for cups or whatever it might be. But you've got Liverpool first game at home. I think that's a great game to have. But then you look at what's up next. You've got West Ham minus Declan Rice away. Then you've got Luton and Forest at home, followed by Bournemouth away. That for a first 5 games, you couldn't really, no disrespect for those teams, but you couldn't really ask for much more. And this is a massive opportunity for Chelsea to put at least 12 points, I feel, on the board and make a very, very solid start and lay those foundations for the season. I mean, do you look at that in the same way? How important are those first 5 to get off to a solid start? Because they are, more towards the kind side of fixtures for sure.
Yeah, definitely starting the season off high needs to happen. Liverpool at home, they've obviously just brought in quite a few new players, new midfield. So we have no idea how they're gonna do. And it's kind of an ideal scenario because it's very similar in terms of we've got a new team, they've got a new team. So you can't really predict it. We've got the home advantage as well. So starting off with a win against Liverpool would be perfect. And then obviously West Ham, no Declan Rice in midfield, their best player has gone. So West Ham, again, you would be looking to get 3 points there. And then obviously Luton, Bournemouth and Forest, those are 3 teams Chelsea should, again, no disrespect to them, should be beating 100%. Chelsea should be beating all 3 of those teams. Not necessarily comfortably, but we should be getting 3 points from all of them. And to start the season off high, I feel is very important. And then to just maintain that level would be really big. But obviously later on in the season we've got to play bigger teams where you would expect us to lose, like obviously City, massive, they're going to be hard to beat. Arsenal at the Emirates, it's going to be a tough game, but just as long as we can start the season high would be perfect. I feel like that's got to be something he looks at. And pre-season I think is going to be really interesting because we're facing obviously, I know Wrexham, that should be an easy win. Not to diss Wrexham, but it should really
for sure.
Yeah. And then you got some harder teams because I know Dortmund's there. There's a Newcastle,
Brighton, Brentford, and Fulham. Like
it's going to be a good preseason. Yeah,
I think it will be a good preseason. I mean, just to round out, mate, what are your expectations for preseason? Because we know that preseason is about fitness, getting minutes in the legs and whatnot, trying tactical things, etc. Kind of establishing an idea of what you think your starting team's going to be. But and we often say that results don't really matter that much in preseason. But I actually think, considering how bad last season was, considering how shambolic preseason was last year, I actually think results in this preseason are really important to set us up for a strong start to the season, because we've lost so much. Like, I honestly do think that the results in this preseason are actually important, and we need to be recording wins as a boost of confidence to head into the new season.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you see this preseason, and what are your expectations for it?
My expectations, I think, quite high. I feel like he does need to put, obviously, the best we can in the preseason. And for me, I think one massive thing is going to be scoring goals in preseason. I want to see this Chelsea team score goals, and quite a few. I mean, definitely against Wrexham. Same with the other teams. I feel like this preseason we've really got to. They've got to give it their all. Really, sounds a bit crazy for a preseason, but they've really got to like prove themselves and prove to, obviously, as fans that, you know, they're ready for the season to come. And they are going to put in a shift, like they're going to perform. So I do think the preseason is very important, 100%, and I've got high hopes for it. So I feel like he's got to work out who he wants to use. So first few games, I can understand loads of changes always happen in preseason, but working out who he wants to keep, what kind of team he wants to play with, and then deciding whether he needs to bring in more players before the season starts, I think it's going to be massive. So hopefully it's a good preseason, and I hope they give it 100%, maybe even 110%. You know, actually go for it, because the wins are important. To have the mentality as well, you want to come in off the preseason feeling high, like you've won all the games. You know, you're feeling good. We wouldn't want to go into the game against Liverpool. No, we just lost, I don't know, 3-0 to Wrexham or something.
Yeah,
that would be ideal. So yeah, I thought it's gonna be got to give it 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine looking at it and think, do you know what? First 2, maybe 3 games, maybe first couple of games, it will be like a different team for each half. And I think once you've then established kind of a bit of an idea, I think you'll start seeing like a lot of players, the players that are, you know, kind of in line to start the first few games of the season, or certainly the first game, will start playing in the third game, maybe 60 odd minutes here or there, and kind of build up their minutes like that way. I think after the first couple of games, you'll stop seeing a different side per half, and you'll start seeing more minutes of the guys that are kind of more likely to feature in those opening games of the season. But, you know, at this point in time, you couldn't really pick who you think are going to be. Although you could pick a few players that you know are probably going to start, but kind of the midfield obviously is a bit of an unknown, and the forward line is a little bit of an unknown as well. So there's definitely certainly loads to get into. There's certainly loads to look forward to, and the preseason tour is getting ever closer. But yeah, I think it seems like a good point to round out this episode. As always, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure that you smash the likes on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, guys, and make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below, whether you would agree or disagree with anything discussed in today's episode, and we'll catch you again in another episode soon, people.